Everyone, welcome back to my interview series. Today, I got a really special guest in the house. Probably one of the most experienced MMA fighters to come out of Canada. I have today Curtis Demarce, the Demon. Introduce yourself, please.
Hey, Curtis Demarce. Started my pro debut in 2005. Been around martial arts scene in Canada and internationally for quite some time now. So, pleasure to have me on the show, and thank you for having me. And yeah, good morning to all.
I like that. So, Curtis, how has the MMA scene changed from when you started in 2005 to now in 2022? What have you noticed is the biggest change?
I think the biggest change is it's became more of a sport. I think um, realistically, when I had started, I think a lot of guys back then were a fighter's fighter. Guys were sitting in the pocket and exchanging and throwing more 5, 6, 7, 8 punch combinations with little 4 ounce gloves on. And nowadays, I feel like it's a lot more evolved. The sport's evolved, the level changes, the angles, the whole game has changed, and I think it's only going to evolve from here. And I think overall, it's very rare to see a fighter's fighter and the fans fighter nowadays. And you know um, I just think that overall game, even with promotions, have changed, and it's looking good. It's looking in the right direction, and but like I said, I just don't think there's not as many fighters as there used to be. It's more athletics and athletes.
Do you think that fighters of old, 2005 era, kind of like Dan Henderson, uh, Forrest Griffin, maybe Randy Couture. Do you think those fighters nowadays, if you were to take them out of that time zone, put them in their respective weight classes nowadays, would still be competitive?
Um, I think I think the toughness and grit with those fighters, um, possibly could put them in the deeper rounds, or even, you know, um, make them, push to a decision. But I don't see them standing a true fair ground with today's athletes. I think the game's evolved too much. I think, like I said, the even just the distance and the striking, with these athletes nowadays, it's changed, especially for mixed martial arts. So, um, yeah, no, I don't think there's gonna be the odd guy. Obviously, I think that that was
Like
ahead of the game.
like an Anderson Silva
Yeah,
or
or
somebody like that?
like if Randy Couture, for instance, if he was ahead of the game at that time too, right?
Yeah, way ahead of his time.
So there were certain individuals that were just ahead of the time and ahead of the game at that time, and I think that those guys, if they were still, in their 30s or healthy and able to, I think they would still be able to hang in there. Do I think that they would ever be champion? I don't think so, but they definitely would be able to put on a good fight.
Now you compete mostly at featherweight, correct?
My whole career, I competed mostly at lightweight, actually. Um, and now, um, when I took things serious, yeah, more or less featherweight, or I did a lot of catch weight at 150, but I feel stronger, healthier, and better at 145 at featherweight. So.
And I talked to a lot of guys just in passing, a lot of MMA fighters, and it seems to me that a lot of guys don't really have, how should I say, like another real tangible skill other than fighting. But you yourself, you're quite educated. You know a lot about recovery, a lot about nutrition. Now, did you learn that out of necessity because you saw it as an advantage that perhaps other fighters weren't invested in how they were recovering, or is it just something that you took interest in?
Actually, like growing up, coming out of high school, my best friend He had actually taken his RMT, his registered massage therapy, um, and I was always interested in just human anatomy in the body and A&P and helping, learning about just the physics of the human body and how our function and our body movement and I wanted to really be able to after my fight career be able to help others and be able to still be involved in the athletic game. So throughout my career, every injury that I actually had, throughout my rehab process, I would actually just study A&P and anatomy and learn more about the human body and how to recover and body mechanics and the proper movements. And it kind of just came hand in hand because I was able to rehab, and that's where I learned most of my my knowledge is just through injuries within myself, and then I ended up going to get my education, my degrees and stuff through university and through massage college and stuff. So it just kind of all fell into place, and I think that every athlete at the end of the day needs to if they haven't already, they will learn about the human body and the mind and diet, and everyone kind of goes through their own their own way of doing it. So
It's a whole encompassing sport, in the sense of, if you're injured all the time, you're not going to be able to perform in the gym. Can't perform in the gym, can't perform well in the cage, this and that. I also wanted to talk to you about what has been your proudest moment in your career so far, because you have such an extensive career. What has been that one moment that's really stood out in your memory?
I think ultimately just being involved in an era and time where it was such an important time for mixed martial arts. It was the turning point, especially in the Canadian scene. I think from 2009 to 2012, there was events and fights almost every weekend across Canada.
Mm-hmm.
It was a booming time. It was a time where I think it opened the public and the eyes of individuals from martial arts, and I think that definitely, being involved and being a part of that, was something real for me. And I think that, and then also just recovering from my injury in 2012.
Can you go a little bit detail about what that injury was?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too deep and bore you guys, but I was on a 8-fight win streak, and then I came off a loss to Marcus Davis, the Irish Hand Grenade in Maximum Fighting Championships, and I was actually signed to fight Brad Causey for a Canadian title, and I was in training camp in Toronto, and I got in a car accident, completely shattered my arm, tore my humerus, snapped in half with multiple hairline fractures. At the time, they actually wanted to amputate it, so I was in the hospital for a month straight. They had to fly in doctors from Buffalo into Toronto because they hadn't seen anything like it. It was just very complicated, the way that the bone structure and the bone were broken, and everything was kind of mashed together. So they figured it out. I ended up just getting extensive surgery on it. 72 pins and 4 plates put in my arm, and they told me I'd never be able to write again with a pen or pencil.
When they brought up the point of amputation, how did that dawn upon you?
I've always believed in healing holistically, and even though it's an injury, it's a little different. But I've always believed in mind over matter and just being able to push yourself. I think, we're built differently. We're able to push through these things, even if we can never get to 100% again. I believe if we properly do the right rehab protocol, we're able to adapt and be able to, um, overcome these things. So in my mind, I knew that this was just something that, kind of like how a doctor or a physician will kind of say, hey, you need to get on this medication or this prescription. I feel in my mind at that time that that wasn't the right choice, and that I was able to work through it. So I did that. I did extensive rehab for 2.5, almost 3 years, and I was able to make return to the cage, and not shying away from any competition. I was jumping right back in there with the top dogs, not only in Canada but in the U.S. So I think that was one of my ultimate, memories and fond moments in my career.
When you came back after your injury, were you at any point worried about that arm, worried about taking kicks on the arm, worried about getting arm locked? Was that something that you were particularly stressed about, or were you just like, whatever happens, happens?
Yeah, I think I was, but I think I definitely could have, going through, a process with my attorney, and going through the lawsuit process, it definitely could have took more time off with just the way that I felt. I wasn't 100%. I knew that going in, but I think being an athlete and being able to do what we love and getting back in there is what really meant the world to me. So, although I wasn't 100%, I knew that I would never get to that full 100%. And even in training, every single punch that I threw, I felt those plates and my elbow jarring at that moment. So, and it sucked because my right hand was my power. My right hand, I dropped a lot of guys with my right hand. So, having taken away that weapon from me and dealing with the precautions and the pain and suffering when I threw my right hook or my straight, that became an issue. And but no, I never thought too much about it. Only in the moment when it would hurt, just because I was so excited to get back in there.
So is it safe to say that you were just so passionate about fighting that was your driving motivation? Like, you just enjoy the feeling of combat?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was it. With like I said, I've always been a competitor. Growing up, I played competitive hockey, and just being in there and feeling alive. Whether I'm 100% or not, it's a different feeling, right? So having the 2 to 3 years off, and being told that you'll never be able to write with a pen or pencil again, and just being able to get back in there and have fun and bang it out, it was a game changer, right? So not only did it spark back my interest in martial arts, but it lit a fire under me to get hungrier, and not only prove to myself, but to prove to those that said that I would never be able to do that again, right? So,
Who introduced you to the game? What was your first day at the gym like?
yeah. So my first game, my first time actually in the gym would have been in I believe 2004.
And how old were you then?
I would have been, I believe I was 15 or 16. I had walked into I'm from a small town, Brandon, Manitoba, so I came from, a town of, I think, 45,000, 50,000 people.
Holy shit.
And there was only one other guy at that time training, or even knowing at the time what MMA competing was. And I walked in, and he didn't know too much at the time, and just because we had no recognized jiu-jitsu program, we didn't have an establishment center to train at. So it was just me and him kind of goofing around and doing some rolls and learning the art of jiu-jitsu. And yeah, I went from there. And about a year later, I went to go visit my mother in London, Ontario. And I was just at the peak of my hockey career as well at the time. And I walked into a warehouse in London, Ontario, and it was the gym was called Team Tompkins. And at the time, there was some kids that really inspired me. Some of the greats from the Canadian scene: Mark Hominick, Sam Stout, Chris Wardecki. So these guys at the time were the TKO champion. At the time, TKO was a huge promotion within the Canadian regional scene.
That's where GSP got his start, his big break.
Yeah, and that's at the time, that's where martial arts really sparked and grew. And I just remember going in there, man, not knowing one single thing, sparring and getting the absolute shit kicked out of me. And I believe I broke my nose that day. And I came back the next day with hockey mentality, and I think I got it from hockey, just from fighting and from the rough play in hockey. And I came back the next day, and they said, "Hey man, welcome to the club." So it was kind of cool, because at that age and at that time, it was almost like I kind of was deserving, because I took my shit kick and came back the next day. So just different times and different era, and that's how I started.
That's crazy. Out of all the promotions that you've been a part of in your extensive career, how many pro fights do you have now?
We're pushing up on 40 here.
Crazy. I was because I don't like to make these interviews time sensitive, but Jorge Masvidal fights Colby Covington. I was looking at his record, and he's got 50 pro fights now. I mean, not counting also the backyard fights, right? Out of all the promotions you've been a part of, what's been your, I guess, highest profile, like biggest event that you think you've been a part of?
I think at the time and the era, I think Maximum Fighting Championship. I think I think at that time it was such a hot era in Canada and in United States and in North America that he was flying in guys worldwide. At the time, it was UFC, Bellator was just starting to bloom, and then they had obviously the organizations in Europe. But as far as a North American promotion, it was UFC, Bellator, and MFC. And I remember every single event that we had fight and competed on, the main card was stacked. It was always UFC vets. It was always guys going to the UFC or top prospects. The show was ran by, it was actually, he partnered up with Mark Cuban, which is, the Dallas Mavericks. It was live on HDNet, so it was viewed by billions and millions of people. And at that time, I think it was, really an eye opener for the other promoters to step their game up in Canada, and that's how a show should have been ran. So I think it was, yeah. To answer your question, it was MFC.
That's very interesting. Let me discuss your nickname, the Demon. Where does that come from? The Demon, Curtis Demarce, man.
Yeah. So it's a funny story. So back in, I guess it would have been my second pro fight, there was a guy named Bob Kellerman versus Demon Seguin, and it was on the poster. It was I think it was the co-main event in Winnipeg. I think it was Ultimate Cage Wars at the time, ran by Krzysztof Szynski, who went off later to go to the UFC, and it was funny because they called me on 2 weeks short notice, and that was just the type of fighter and guy that I was back then. Was,
you were just available. You were just available, ready to fight.
I was new at the game, and back then it was, like mentioned earlier, it's, we love to fight, right? So, so I took the short notice fight, and they never ended up changing the poster. And back then, that's how it was. So we ended up showing up to the venue for weigh-ins, and everyone's like, Kurt, your name's Demon Seguin. And then my friend Eric Klipliff and Brock, they ended up coming together, and they were like, hey, what do you guys think of Demon Demarce? Kind of goes good together, right?
Yeah.
So, that's the funny story. That's how it came about, and Demon, I never actually got to end up seeing Demon Seguin ever in action, so, but that's where it came from.
So you took another man's nickname.
Yeah, well, that wasn't even his nickname. That was his first name.
Oh.
His first name was Demon.
Just straight up Demon.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So
that's mental. That's funny. That's crazy. What I always ask people this. I asked Jesse Arnett, I asked Dylan this question. Let's say you had unlimited resources, any accessibility to a camp. What's your dream fight? Somebody in your weight class that you wish you could have gotten in there with, just to see what you could do.
I think I think it would have been about 8 years ago now, but we were in talks to fight Leonard Garcia.
Ooh.
And Leonard was a banger. He was exciting. I think he had a ton of fight of the night performances in the UFC. And then I think he ended up going off after his MMA career to bare knuckle. But that was a guy that stylistically it would have been such an exciting fight that he's a guy that not necessarily look up to him, but I look up to the fact that he'll go out there with a shield and put on any exciting war fight, and those were the days of putting on those types of exciting fights, right? So I think it would be Leonard Garcia. I think stylistically that would have been a real good matchup.
And in your prime, how do you think that would have went?
I think I would have edged him. I think in my prime, I think I would have definitely worn him out. I would have been bigger, stronger, faster, and I think more powerful. I think I would have landed and possibly even TKO'd him on the ground. So, but I just think that would have been such a fun, exciting fight.
Yeah, I mean, I like asking people that question because I obviously don't have anywhere near the extensive career you do, but it's something I like to think about because it's one of my dreams to like look across the ring or whatever it is and see someone that I've recognized from TV or something and be like, wow, like I'm really doing this, Because you've also traveled a lot for training, so you rubbed shoulders with a lot of people in the game. You spent time at Alpha Male.
Yeah, I've been able to. I lived in San Diego for 5 or 6 years, so I was able to be in the EPA of jiu-jitsu and the EPA of where it's all at, for MMA. And at that time, that's where it was booming. That's where all the guys were, San Diego. I was training at the arena, so I got to train, alongside of Chris Cyborg, KJ Noons, Joe Duarte, a lot of real Jeremy Stevens. Dom Cruz was over at Alliance, but just in general, that whole time frame, everyone loved San Diego and everyone was training there. So,
now be honest here, San Diego or Alberta?
Yeah, I don't know if I have to answer that. But
that's fair.
But ultimately, I was very blessed. I was very grateful and lucky. I got to travel and just up north. in San Jose. I got to train at AKA for my title fight against Parvez for Unified.
That's awesome.
And when I caught him with a spinning back fist and got to train, Khabib and Daniel Cormier and those guys. So I've been very lucky, very blessed. And then
What was do you have any memories of Khabib? What was he like before he made it?
at that time, at that era, 2000, I think it was 2016. So he was, it was only a few years ago, and he was still, I think he was just climbing up the UFC rankings.
I think he would have been in the top 10.
Yeah, he was still up there,
Yeah.
but he, super humble, super focused. I've never met someone, with that type of determination and focus before. And I think that's what really pushed him to the newer, higher levels. And, not only is he great, father, coach, and fighter, but he's actually, I believe he's undefeated as a coach now as well. So, I think ultimately, he's pound for pound the best fighter to ever live on this planet for MMA. But yeah, I was lucky, like I was saying. I've also been to Alpha Male, Sanford, just lucky. So
Would you say it's luck, or would you say you seek those opportunities when you had the chance to? Because I know there's a lot of really, really good fighters that more or less prefer to be the main guy at their gym, right? They want to be the local hero, the local celebrity, and there's nothing wrong with that. But do you think there's value in, even if you're succeeding in your circle, do you think there's value to being, the big fish in the ocean instead of being the big fish in the little pond?
I think I was always the small fish in the big pond. I was always taking short notice fights. I was always taking, you know, I was never, one of those guys that would just wanted the easy way out. I didn't want to pad my record. I didn't want to go in there and get 7-8 wins. So for me, I definitely would rather prefer to be at a gym and be the underdog and be, you know, the one with the least experience, or even the one learning the most, because as long as I'm there getting beat up, and as long as I'm there learning and evolving, that's all that matters to me. Because at the end of the day, if I'm the bigger fish in a small pond, there's not much left for me to learn. So I loved being at those gyms because of the environment, the atmosphere, the energy, and just being able to grow as a fighter and an individual.
That's a very honest take on that question. Now, in fighting, when you put two bad men in the cage, things can go wrong rather quickly, right? What do you think has been your lowest point, and how did you overcome it? And how do you think people should overcome hard points in their athletic endeavors, I guess?
I think for me, there's been a lot of poor decisions on my behalf of like I said, not shying away from any fight, getting caught at the wrong times, caught up in my own personal life and still taking a fight, or injuries and still taking the fight.
Because sometimes a promoter will approach you, and it's clearly a setup, and sometimes you just, it's a trap, but you willingly walk in, thinking.
Yeah, but again, a lot of my mistakes, and this was just because I loved the game so much, and I loved not so much the sport of martial arts and the the mind, body, spirit of learning and growing and evolving with it, but I was more in love with fighting. I loved to fight, whether I was injured, whether I was hurt, whether I was sick, it didn't matter. So you could call me up on a week's notice, and that you could rely on me, and I'll still put Fight of the Night on for that promotion. And I think that's what I regretted the most, was being able to take these fights, even against guys that weren't at my level, and not strategically fighting them smart, and going in there and and feeling what it feels like to lose with no remorse, and not knowing why I lost that fight,
Yeah.
And then I think ultimately though, with that, it came, I wanted more hunger and the ability to be able to bounce back from a loss means so much more than going in and just beating someone, whether it's easy or not, right? So I think it's always given me a drive. It's always given me motivation to kind of bounce back and do better, whether it's in my own life choices or with fighting.
That's yeah, I like to bring that up because, in this game it's not always, it's very rare that you come out of this unscathed, like you just walk in. There's always the exceptions, right? Like a Floyd Mayweather, it could be, but those are athletes that A, they have exceptional ability, and B, have exceptional management, right? Like in Canada, a lot of times these guys don't have the options to pick their fights either, right? It's kind of, you have to take what you can get sometimes. I'm gonna ask you this because I met you at the UFC gym when you were training with Jesse Arnett. 2017, 2018, I can't quite remember, and I'm interested in the answer for this. What was your first impression of me? And we've trained together for fights. How do you think I prepare people for fights?
At the time when I had first met you, Jesse just kind of said, "Hey, I've been hitting pads with this little brown kid, and he's pretty good, He
were you like, yeah, right, okay, let's see?
Yeah, I didn't really know, because UFC gyms were chains, and it was more based off just trying to get people in for more of like a cardio workout.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Jesse said, "Hey man, this little brown kid's good, and he moves well, he's fast, and I think he could be really good at holding pads for me." So as time went on, I got to see what he was about, what Johnson was about, and yeah, like his it was really good. His technique was good. He was able to see things that most other people wouldn't be able to see, and look at now, 4 or 5 years later, and a lot of us use Johnson for pad work. So it was funny situation, because just the way Jesse approached me, he's like, "Hey, this little brown kid," So, but yeah, man, he definitely is a guy that is super reliable and good with pads, and good at coaching. So, hit him up.
That was a way better answer I was expecting. I was expecting the demon to talk shit. But yeah, man, I appreciate that. And couple closing thoughts. Where do you see yourself after fighting? And looking back on it, do you regret anything? I mean, obviously mistakes were made, but
yeah, I mean, looking back on my career, I mean, like I said, as it started at a time, I don't come from a wrestling or kickboxing background. I don't come from any sort of martial art background. I was a kid kind of thrown into the wolves. I think I started my pro debut when I was 17 with no management, no proper guidance. So without the guidance, and without a good affiliation and a local promotion to help build you up, which 90% of these guys do nowadays. It's just different, right? It becomes more about pride and more about being, like I said, a fighter's fighter. There wasn't anyone that I wouldn't fight, and I would always put on a show. So for me, do I regret, not being able to pad my record or not being able to do things a little more effectively? Yeah, but during the circumstances and where I'm from, and uh, where I come from and my background and stuff, it's very. I don't know if there was any other way. I think this was the way that I had to drive my path, my career, and I think I'm making one last run at 145. I'm undefeated at 145 still, and although although even my last, I think, two fights have been against killers at 155, 160. I think I owe it to myself. I'm still young. I'm 33. I got a few years left in me, and I'm gonna make this last run at 145. And I've been in the middle of writing a book. So once I'm done my career, I'm gonna release my book, and I've got my education, my schooling to fall back onto, and just the knowledge that I've been able to share and been able to.
And you're sorry to interrupt you, but you're also spending some time coaching as well.
Yeah, so I'm also coaching kids and adults MMA and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm able to share my knowledge. Like I said, I've got a lot of experience and not only with fighting, but being able to be around some of the best guys in the world. So seeing how the gyms are ran, seeing how poor gyms are ran, and some of the best in the world, and seeing how each individual does their camps and how they diet, and so for me, I think I'm able to adapt and share this type of knowledge when I'm done, and I think that I think everyone has a time, and I think, like I said, it's not my time yet, but I think I can still do some damage at 145. So
The demon does damage.
let's get it.
Let's get it. Now, you also have a bit of a passion project going on, breeding Frenchies, French bulldogs. How did you get into that, and why breeding dogs specifically? What's your passion for it?
Yeah, so I've always been, an animal lover. I've always been a dog lover. I've always had more like a smaller dog. I've always had, Boston Terriers, pugs. So within the last few years, I ended up getting some French bulldogs, and when I was in Florida, I ended up getting a specific exotic color that when I got her, I was just going through a super rough patch in my life over COVID and stuff, and there's some things personally going on in my life, so I actually ended up getting Callie, and I just kind of fell in love, man. Like, there's people that have an attachment and love and for certain animals or certain beings, and then there's people that don't connect or don't have those attachments to animals. So for me, it was not so much about the love for them, but I just wanted to be able to produce high top quality French bulldogs. I think that there's a lot of misled dog breeders in the world, and I think that a lot of them are doing it for the wrong reasons, for profit gains.
Try to make a quick buck.
Yeah, and I think if you truly put your love and energy into something that you love, you're gonna get the best product out of it. So we produce top quality, you know, DNA gene lines of Frenchies, and you know, I got two going on three of my own, so wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's amazing, Kurt. Well, that's gonna wrap up our interview. It was awesome talking to you, and you're a gem in Canadian MMA, my friend.
Thanks, brother. Nowhere near some of those guys, but thank you, and it was great having me on here, and I appreciate it. And watch out, 145ers.
Let's go 145. Let's go.